And no one that I know personally got eaten by a pig, but there was a neighbor where I used to live on a farm that did get eaten by a pig, and it was always deemed kind of suspicious. So I just thought that was an interesting story, and I like quirky stuff, and when I hear quirky stuff, I squirrel it away and then I put it in my writing. Because life is interesting and life is weird, so I throw that in. Well, I've written 3 books that I brought, but the most recent one is the novel. It's called Lunacy and Acts of God. And prior to that, I'd written 2 poetry books, which are also here. One is called Puzzled, and one is called Valentine. And I may read a little bit from those also, but primarily here to talk about the novel. Lunacy and Acts of God is a fictional story about community in the 1950s. It's about prejudice passed through generations. Quirky and marginalized peoples are differences, similarities, and choices. I've tried to tell this story with humor and with compassion, depicting Midwest America and the stereotypes that were so prevalent back in the 1950s. Topeka back then experienced what I think is a unique convergence of many national and international things. First of all, we had 3 psychiatric institutions. We had the Menninger Foundation, which was international, Topeka State Hospital, and the brand new Veterans Administration Hospital, which was built exclusively for mental health of veterans right after the war. We had Forbes Air Force Base, and they had the U-2 spy planes that caused a big stir when they got shot down. Of course, the Potawatomi Native American Reservation north of town. We had a hate-spewing, picketing church, which a lot of people know about. That didn't happen so much in the 50s as it did in the 60s, but I took some literary license with that. There was, of course, Brown versus Board of Education, which was huge nationwide. We had the Communist Cold War going on, which was a big thing. We had the surrounding farming community, and all of this occurred during the administration of a Kansas president, Dwight Eisenhower. I used every one of those elements as a starting point for this book, plus a murder mystery. But I want to emphasize it is ultimately a work of fiction, even though you will recognize, if you're familiar with Topeka or Topeka history, you'll recognize an awful lot of things and people. I will also say that my own grandmother spent 15 years in the Topeka State Hospital as a patient back in the 1930s to 1950. So this is a personal book for me. And I will issue a warning. There are offensive phrases in this book. Because unfortunately, it was how people talked and thought back then about different groups of others that were different from them. So if you're offended about something, good. I'm glad you're offended, because it is offensive, the things that people used to say and think and feel and treat each other. So I was saying that you may be offended by some of the phrases in this book. There's no vulgarity or anything like that, but it does reflect the attitudes that some people expressed towards others back then. So with that, I'm going to read the opening of this book. It's called Lunacy and Acts of God. This is the prologue. When I was 9 years old, I discovered that Kansas had a surplus of weather and lunatics. Yes, it is funny. That was the year the temperature dropped 70 degrees in one day, the year I got struck by lightning, and the year a blizzard killed 23,000 cattle. That year, I was terrorized by some certifiably crazy people. One of them liked to eat dirt, as a murder occurred so dramatically that even J. Edgar Hoover himself became personally involved. That year, I got hauled off in a police car once and put in the hospital twice, and Uncle Gott's wedding was interrupted by the mafia, which was pretty unusual for Kansas. That extraordinary year, I almost lost my best friend. Oh, and that year, Mother became an Avon lady. Until then, I'd led a very quiet life. Nowadays, we're far kinder and don't use the term lunatics. And now I understand how in 1958, superior forces, institutions, and people converged to impact the innocence and ugliness of my small Midwestern hometown. So mostly none of this was my fault. How could I have known that my young life would bump up against a whole lot of history with such extreme consequences? But then again, maybe some of it was my fault. April 1959, the psychiatric capital of the world. My sister Harmony would later, in a rare moment of sympathy, try to console me. "You can't help the weather, Melody," she said. "Everybody knows that's acts of God. And you weren't responsible for the murder either. But mostly you couldn't help it because we live in the psychiatric capital of the world." She said this so matter-of-factly that I couldn't figure out if living in the psychiatric capital of the world was something good or bad. "Don't think about it too hard," she said, "because I doubt if the Chamber of Commerce brags on this particular distinction." "You know what Dad said," she continued. "Our dad was an authority on lunatics, since he was around them every day at his Meadow Green Clinic job. He says that between the state hospital, the VA hospital, and the Meadow Green Clinic, every third person in this town is under psychiatric care, and another third needs to be." That didn't include us, of course. Well, at least not in the beginning. She explained that was what was wrong with all the people we saw walking around town conversing by themselves. That was the phrase she used, too, conversing by themselves. I believe what she said was, "Once they start conversing by themselves, Melody, sooner or later they're going to end up in Topeka. Some get sent here against their will, but most of them are just drawn here because they fit right in." It was true. We considered it part of the landscape. At least Meadow Green mostly keeps their patients off the streets. But I think the state hospital and the VA hold some kind of competition to issue the most day passes. Heck, those nuts are usually harmless, though occasionally somebody really unhinged goes off the deep end and then it's too late. As you found out, Melody. Then you can't put the genie back in the bottle. When I looked confused at this, Harmony reverted to her normal, condescending tone. "It's a figure of speech, dummy. They're not real genies. They're disturbed, emotionally unbalanced human beings with frequent unacceptable social behaviors and occasional breaks with reality." My sister talked funny like that because she herself suffered from intellectual, a brain disease that affected a person's speech and behavior. It's hard to say where she picked it up, and amazing we hadn't all caught it, but I heard Dewey tell Mother one time that Harmony sure was young to be so intellectual, so I knew she had it bad. It was a shame, too, since here we were living in the psychiatric capital of the world, and we couldn't even get Harmony's brain fixed. Harmony didn't walk around town conversing by herself, so she wasn't crazy as far as we knew, just our weird older sister. The difference was important because I shared a room with her and had to be prepared in case she crossed the line. Mother told me not to worry about it too much, that there was a long way to go before the intellectual part became permanent. We had a lot of funny ideas about people back then. My name is Melody Lark Friedrich because Mother likes birds a lot, especially meadowlarks, the beautiful state bird of Kansas. But since nobody names their daughter Meadowlark, they named me Melody Lark, Melody for short. Harmony said not only was I not melodic, but I was positively cacophonous. I didn't know what that meant until Janie Bryant across the street helped me look it up in the dictionary. It means an unpleasant sound. Harmony liked to claim that my experiences, the unsettling events that began in 1958 when I was 9, had their roots 100 years earlier when crazy Kansas abolitionist John Brown went around murdering people because he thought God called him to free the slaves. There was a huge, scary mural of him right across from the governor's office in the Kansas state capitol, all wild-eyed and holding a Bible in one hand and a rifle in the other. Since there had been a murder in my experiences, maybe Harmony was right. Historically speaking, she insisted, that was when Kansas accepted irrational violence as a means of settling social policy. Hence, Carrie Nation, who enforced her temperance ideas with a hatchet, and the goat gland doctor who, but that wasn't our family, interrupted Dad. He knew a lot about Kansas history and knew when Harmony needed interrupting. It was when the boar ate Grandpa Richard that our family got changed. But, you know, everything just hits Melody harder. He didn't mention the whole murder business at that point, or the fact that I was struggling, because we were a polite family. But on the bright side, Harmony switched perspectives. The boar was also responsible for hauling Grandma Dale out of the Dark Ages. That's a lot of power for a barnyard animal with a ring in its snout. She always had to have the last word. Part of her intellectual, I guess. They were referring to one particular pig in 1954, the one who started all the strangeness. How, you ask? I will tell you. 5 years earlier, April 1954. I don't know how much you want me to read. The next chapter is about the pig. I can continue. What's your pleasure?
Well, what do you want to do?
Let's see how long this
I want
is.
something interesting.
Well, I would like to give you something interesting. Let me read about the pig. The second chapter is called The Pig, and this is 5 years earlier than the psychiatric capital of the world. Since most of my relatives lived on farms, we were all used to barnyard animals. But even in the large farming community surrounding Topeka, there had been fascination and a little suspicion about the pig having eaten our grandfather. Richard Friedrich, Dad's frugal father, had been a farmer since our ancestors came to Kansas from Germany in pioneer times. He was so frugal, Dad would say, that till the day he died, he wouldn't get electricity or indoor plumbing for the farm, even though he'd socked a lot of money away. Great Uncle Gott was in agreement. Kids, Uncle Gott would say, your grandfather was a good man and a righteous man, but he preferred dying with his money in the bank to living with the flush toilet in his house. Now that's frugal. No offense intended, he would add. Like I said, a polite family. Grandma Dale, Dad's mother, was facing the prospect of hauling water from the well the rest of her life when suddenly Grandpa Richard met with a tragic accident. He slipped and fell into the pig pen and was eaten by a rogue boar. There were no witnesses. What was the boar's name? Mitchell, my little brother, had asked once. I guess he thought it had a name like Killer or Widowmaker. I don't know, Dad replied. We just always called him the boar. He'd never eaten anyone before. At ages 4 and 5, Mitchell and I were deemed too young to go to Grandpa Richard's funeral at the Evangelical Methodist Church. But Harmony filled us in later, including how the casket had caused some problems. It was so shiny it reflected my black patent leather shoes in darting shimmers all over the sanctuary. She paused to make darting shimmer movements with her hand, then resumed. That, coupled with the overpowering floral arrangements, gave a sort of bumblebee effect to the whole service. The fact that they had a casket at all was remarkable, given that there wasn't much of Grandpa left to bury. Following the funeral, I tried to remember what he had been like in one piece. Mostly I remembered a gray-haired man in bib overalls who gave us sticks of spearmint gum, then our being prompted to shout, "Thank you," into his hearing aid. Once I woke up in the middle of the night, wondering if Grandpa's hearing aid had been eaten too. After Grandpa died, Grandma Dale made some changes from the existence that had marked her entire life. She began by running electricity to the farm. Not just to the house either, but to the cow barn, the chicken houses, the garage, the tool shed, the implement shed, and the granary. Then she ordered the hired hands, Maynard and Virgil Shukahosi, to bring the grain truck from the implement shed and drive her to town, where she bought an electric heating system for the house, an electric stove, electric refrigerator, an electric mix master, an electric washing machine, sewing machine, radio, an electric phonograph, television, even an electric incubator for the hen house. She bought electric lamps of all shapes, sizes, and colors and put them in every room. She bought several electric fans to use during the hot summer months and a salon-size electric hair dryer for her bedroom. She wouldn't pay to have anything delivered, though. She made Maynard and Virgil load everything in the back of the grain truck to bring home, then made them unload it all at the farm. The next day, she returned to town and ordered a modern telephone, one without a crank and without a party line, installed in the dining room. Finally, she hired workmen from town to regenerate her life with indoor plumbing, building her a sink and faucets in the kitchen and an indoor bathroom complete with lavatory, toilet, bathtub, and a floor-to-ceiling mirror along one wall. She selected blue imported Italian tile to line the rest of the room. Every 10th tile had a blue fish on it. "I've never seen the ocean," she explained, "so I'm bringing the ocean to Kansas." I'm only mentioning all this about the pig and the funeral and Grandma's newfound wealth so you will appreciate what happened next. Because just when we thought we'd seen the end of Grandma Dale's acquisitions, she picked out a new husband. Because, she said, "I need somebody to help me share these pleasures and maybe give me a few new ones." Rumor was that Grandma and Dewey had met at a dance, but it seemed hard to picture a woman of that size dancing. Grandma Dale, after all, was a very round, stout person who braced her legs when she walked, a condition left over from the polio epidemic of 1916 when she was young. Dancing or not, that's how Dewey came into our lives. "Call me Dewey," he told us right off the bat, so we did. Dewey Utes was a big, raw-boned hillbilly from Arkansas. Not big because he was tall, but big because you couldn't take your eyes off of him. He was not German, he was not a Methodist, and he wasn't particularly frugal the way Grandpa Richard had been. He was not even a farmer and did not wear bib overalls, instead preferring khakis at his blacksmith job for the Santa Fe Railroad shops in town. His wife had died, just as Grandma Dale's husband had, so I guess he was lonely too. He had a grown unmarried son, Dad's new stepbrother, and our new step-uncle, Rex Oliver Utes. Dewey and Rex Oliver and electricity and running water all arrived at my grandmother's farm simultaneously, all precipitated by that overwrought pig. That's when everything started changing. Okay, we'll stop there. Any questions? Oh, yes.
How much of this is fiction and how much of it is on your real life? And is it your life? Is this family stories?
Some of it is.
Okay.
Some of it is. Or, again, I took some literary license with many stories and many people and institutions because I don't want to get sued. But I think you will recognize quite a few things in here from Topeka. But I did have a little brother. I don't have an older sister. I did have a grandfather who very much resembled Dewey, who was a hillbilly from Arkansas with a third grade education. There's a lot more coming that I won't give away yet.
Okay, well, I think it's funny that the grandmother, when her husband passed away, she just went hog wild.
Hog wild, yes, that's a good way to put it.
Spent all this money, so it's very funny.
And no one that I know personally got eaten by a pig, but there was a neighbor where I used to live on a farm that did get eaten by a pig, and it was always deemed kind of suspicious. So I just thought that was an interesting story, and
That happens a lot.
does it?
Yeah.
Well, I like quirky stuff, and when I hear quirky stuff, I squirrel it away and then I put it in my writing. Because life is interesting and life is weird, so I throw that in. But I wrote this 30 years ago, could not get a publisher for it, tried and tried, sent it off, and in those days, you had to double print and double space, print it out on lots and lots of paper, and then physically mail that big, heavy package, Manuscript, to each publisher, which was expensive and tedious. Nobody wanted to publish it, so after about 80 rejections, I gave up and put it in a drawer. But I always still liked the story. So, as I was telling Sophie, I have been auditing classes at Washburn University in Topeka for 10 years now. I have a degree, but I do this for fun. And one of the classes I audited was advanced fiction writing. So I drag out my manuscript for this book and I bring it to class, and the class critiqued it. And the teacher gave me some excellent suggestions on some changes. I made those changes and then immediately got published with Flint Hills Publishing, which I'm very grateful for. So I give Washburn a lot of credit for getting this book published. It's about tolerance, which is just as important now, maybe even more so now than it was then. So there's quite a story that weaves through this. You've just heard the first part. Any questions? Yes?
When was this book published? You said after Washburn classes, and so what was the year? Yeah.
Last year, 2025, February, so not even a whole year yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yep. And it's done really well. Even Mayor Padilla wrote a blurb for it on the back. I asked the mayor if he would read it, and he did, and he liked it, so he wrote a blurb. So, yes.
Did you need to make very many revisions after the first writing?
Well, I don't remember how many revisions over the years I've made, but I will tell you the big revision I made after my class at Washburn was the teacher said to go back and read the book True Grit, which I had never read. I know the movie, of course, but never read the book. It's also told by a young girl in the first person, only in that book she speaks directly to the audience. And that was what I changed, because that made much more sense to speak directly to the audience. Plus, it allowed me to put in some, I call them disclaimers, which is periodically the narrator voice, Melody, will step back and talk to the reader and say, I'm really ashamed to say that's the way people used to talk back then. Because I want the readers to know that Melody didn't stay that way. She recognizes some of the things that were going on. She recognizes now when she's older. But she tells the story as a 9-year-old, basically. Well, are you interested in any poetry? Could read a few of those, perhaps?
I'd like to hear out of your Valentine book.
Sure. I wrote Valentine first. It was my very first book. And then,
Children's book?
no, it's poetry
Poetry.
for adults. And then I wrote Puzzled, and there's a story here. I wrote Valentine, and then the pandemic hit, and so nobody paid any attention. This is it's got a little something for everybody. It's got funny poems, it's got rhyming poems, non-rhyming poems, existential deep poems, very serious poems, because that's just what I write. And then the same with Puzzled, although Puzzled also is illustrated with some beautiful artwork from my cousin in Germany that I've never met. And she is a fantastically gifted artist. She lives close to Hamburg. And the story behind that is in 1882, my great-grandfather's parents came to this country, and the brother of that gentleman stayed behind in what was then Pomerania. And so she's descended from the branch that stayed behind, and I'm descended from the one that came to Kansas. And our respective families have stayed in touch. She's a fifth cousin, and it's pretty amazing that we've stayed in touch over all these years, all these miles, 2 world wars and so forth. But I would send her my poems on email, and she'd send me her pictures. And one day she said, if you ever do another poetry book, feel free to use my paintings. So I said, okay. So it's beautifully illustrated. Valentine is also illustrated by me with just line drawings. So just little doodles and stuff, but it makes it interesting. So I went to school in Massachusetts. So I made a beeline for Emily Dickinson's grave and house when I got there. It was right across the river. And I wrote a poem, of course, about it, because I was a poet. Before I get to that, let me read you another one. This poem is called Soulmates, and it won an award for the best whimsical poem in Kansas. It's one of the rhyming poems that I wrote. It's called Soulmates. You bring your umbrella and I'll bring my crystal vase. We'll set up house together in some gimcrackery little place where you can store your suitcase, where I brew a pot of tea with hopes and hesitations and steeped leaves from a hazelnut tree. You bring your religion and I'll bring my Persian cat, perhaps a bottle of Merlot and a thrift store welcome mat. You'll cook the spaghetti, I will play the mandolin. Evenings will find us shiny and wearily numb from the raptures of sin. You bring your neuroses and I will bring my pain. We'll bleed through the rough edges until most of those dragons are slain. Then you'll pull out the swans, the hearts, and the galaxies far, far away, and I will respond with a villanelle and a calla lily bouquet. So bring your fool's gold, dear, and I'll bring pennies galore. We'll have enough to rent paradise for a year and a day, maybe more. You remember that first love and that's how you felt and it was all gooey and mushy? That's Soulmates. Let's see if I can find my Emily poem. Ah, here it is. This is from Valentine. It's called Homage. I made the graveyard pilgrimage to see the old New England plot, the grave of Emily. An iron fence around the stone held sway in keeping all admirers away, but didn't stop ecstatic wild nights, quotes, or scribbled phrases left on many grass-stained notes. I was a young girl then and quite obsessed, so went there hoping my verse could be judged and blessed, as if her simple greatness could be found and passed from that cold oracle in the ground to lend my work her authenticity and stroke the hopeful feathers of my vanity. But the bell of Amherst held her secrets dear and spoke no word of her instructions in my ear. She was to such requests as mine immune, consigned to immortality that afternoon. I left the grave and never went again, although I still write poems every now and then. This is a little bit of an existential poem, because sometimes I get that way. And have any of you been to the Sternberg Museum in Hayes? Or you know of it? Okay. It's a dinosaur kind of museum of all the fossils that have been found around. And it opens with a quote from a book by Charles Sternberg that was written over 100 years ago. Okay, the name of the poem is called The Lot Sent to Munich. The quote is, possibly some of the missing fragments of the skulls in Cope's collection, now in the American Museum, may be in the lot sent to Munich, and vice versa. This was written by Charles Sternberg in his book Life of a Fossil Hunter about his 1895 expedition. Back in the 1880s and 90s, there was fierce competition in something called the Bone Wars, where these archaeologists and profiteers, frankly, would go out and try to dig up stuff and sell it to museums. So that's what this is about. You live a complete life, then you die. After millions of years, you find yourself in the Texas breaks near Gray Creek in Mr. Craddock's pasture, reduced to fragmentary specimens in a bone bed carved by floods into a narrow gulch, concreted into sward and sediment, as limbo cushions you from the unimportance of your nullification. Did you ever matter to your fellow Nanosaurus clavengers? Though I suppose even a giant fin-backed lizard had a mother. Some bipedal creature that never existed during your lifetime comes along with a pick and an obsession. Here, little bones, he calls, precious bones, sweet bones, where are you? As if something called money could be worth any part of you. Your communion with eons and ages endures a brief interruption then, relatively speaking. Still, it's a resurrection. Not life exactly, but a pardon. The patient, meticulous strokes of soft brushes and careful mallets compelling death to surrender you from the casket of Mr. Craddock's evolving pasture. Will we all be thusly dusted off someday by a being we don't recognize? Our lots sent to New York or Munich or heaven like sweet bony freight? How does it feel, I wonder, when eternity has an addendum? It was discovered that none of the narrow gulch's fragments could be reassembled into a perfect skull. That's pretty existential, isn't it? You want a funny one? I'll do a funny one.
Okay.
Now, I will say this one,
Wait for something funny.
okay, I wrote this one and I'm kind of embarrassed to say that it does some body shaming, and I apologize for that. It was already published by the time I sort of realized this, but it is sort of funny, but it's kind of bad. It's called Modern Love Story. Gladys Thong wore her underwear way too tight. But try as she might to lose weight, she remained a size 28. Her boyfriend, Jose, had something to say. Baby, my snuggle buffalo, to get you up requires a backhoe. But Gladys was in no mood for his judgmental attitude. Oh, pooh, she said, and you have a tiny, pointed head. So if you're going to be whiny, let's both call it quits, because as girlfriends go, I'm as good for you as it gets. And so they parted, two odd ducks, both broken-hearted, each seeking someone more deluxe. However, Gladys and Jose weren't really that bizarre, because love, like underwear, will only stretch so far.
That was cute.
That is cute.
That was cute.
So, yeah, this covers a lot of stuff, a lot of spectrums, a lot of moods, a lot of emotions. Rhyming, non-rhyming. Anyway,
Well, when do you feel you're going to, I should raise my hand.
that's okay.
When do you feel you're going to write your next book?
I don't know. I haven't been in the mood. I'm so grateful that after 30 years, I finally got my novel published. I've sort of been resting on that laurel for now and enjoying it and getting it into the hands of people who might enjoy it. Hopefully people will. And I do have some notes on a sequel, but I haven't done anything with them yet. But it's the same family. It's just a continuation of their story a little bit further in time. Any questions? Anybody in here a poetry geek that really likes poetry? I'm going to read my poem for poetry geeks. And this is an audience participation poem. So when I say, you guys, you have to supply the next line, because you will know it, because you're poetry geeks. Poem for poetry geeks. With poems, I have a rendezvous. I didn't mean to, but I do. My own poems don't always flow, a fact most English majors know, compared to the sublime excess as how do I love these coalesce, and ravens quoth, and brigades die, and roads diverge in a wood, and I have water, water everywhere, but don't go gentle anywhere. And still I rise where sidewalks end, and lonely clouds are my best friend. A loaf of bread, a jug of wine, a summer's day, a pickup line. Soon love is like a red, red rose, or two if by sea, I suppose. Then there's the Jabberwocky song. It howls a bit, though I was wrong that coy mistress was a sham, for Mary had a little lamb to go with her green
Robe.
no, green eggs and ham. See, you are poetry geeks, but you weren't enough poetry geeks. Okay, so Mary had a little lamb to go with her green eggs and ham, because the lamb was the entree and then the eggs. All right. So now I'm captain of my soul, and know full well for whom bells toll. That's why wild nights, instead of thee, I wrap myself in poetry. In doing so, I do not sleep. I take to the open road. I weep. I walk in beauty like the night and sail a pea-green boat in spite of life with loveliness to sell and 7 circles just for hell. Then Grecian urn, calico cat, and mighty Casey at the sing odes to nightingales for years, then part in silence and in tears. While Gunga Din may, may his tribe increase, and Agamemnon and his niece play Lady of Shalott till dawn, then go where Simon's pieman's gone. Between the crosses, row on row, like weeds as country churchyards go. Well, it's never been more clear to me, in such praiseworthy company, I think that I shall never see a Nobel Prize for poetry.
Yeah.
So that's probably enough for now. Yeah, that one has a gazillion quotes from many, many poems that a lot of people have read. Everybody's read something from there, I'm sure.
How did you come up with the name Valentine for one book?
Well, I have a poem in here named Valentine, and then I have a poem in Puzzled named Puzzled,
Oh, cool.
which actually, let me read Puzzled. Okay, now that you mention it,
Okay.
your captive audience. So this is another somewhat existential poem. Puzzled. She stuffed disparate pieces into the jigsaw puzzle of her life, seldom gracefully. Here a fender bender, there a fer-de-lance, a handful of stupendous blessings. Occasionally she stepped back, puzzled, to view the result. Hard to say, impressionist, surreal. Once she considered what would happen if, at the end, a single piece were missing, as if an inconsequential cat had hockey-pucked it to the floor and under the karmic sofa, so that the path out of the garden would never become her road to enlightenment. She sighed and harumphed at the crazy colors, awkward shapes, and uneven energies that had kaleidoscoped themselves into such a brave assembly. She knew then they would always remain a puzzle. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Ruth.
Oh, thank you all very much. Appreciate the opportunity.